welcome to this conversation. This is a privilege for me to get to speak to you. Let me just ask you to start by talking about the what it was like in Greece at that time. In 1968, this was Greece's first European victory in any sport, from what I understand, against the Slavia of Prague team. And it was really unexpected. They were not probably expected to even be in the finals, let alone play a team like Slavia and ultimately win that game. But the movie about that competition, that championship game, is really the backdrop to four other stories about what it was like to live in Greece at that time. Yes, it was April 4th, 1968. So obviously it was the same day that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and you address that and some of the other historic events at that time. But just for Greeks in particular, what it was like in Greece before that game and after that game.
First of all, the correct description. It's not Greece's victory, it's a Greek team's victory. AEK was the first basketball team, and actually it was the first sports club that after the establishment of the Greek state won an international trophy. That took place in 1968. It was somewhere 50 years after the foundation of this club. That took place in 1924, where Greek refugees coming from Istanbul, they founded in Athens, in Greece, the sports club of AEK, Athletic Union of Constantinople. It started as a general sports club. It had track and field, it had football, it had volleyball, and of course it had basketball. So in 1968, during the 50s and 60s, the basketball team of AEK, it was in a very efficient, very good condition, always in the first category of the league, for the Greek league in basketball. And a couple of times before, during the early 60s, AEK approached to be in the semi-finals of the European League, but that didn't happen. So in 1968, it was the first anniversary of the Greek military regime. So the atmosphere in Greece, it was very toxic and very, very polarized, because it was the first year that we had junta here.
There were curfews, correct? And they couldn't gather as a crowd, is that correct?
Well, yes, actually, but especially for this game, it was permitted, although there were many, secret policemen inside the stadium, because I didn't see the game. I wasn't there. I was 11 years old. I listened the game. I heard the game from the radio, which actually appears in the film, and I had it inside still in my place. So, but I do know, talking to people that they were inside the stadium, they were telling me that they would expect the slightest spark of resistance, of complaint, in order the whole stadium to start shouting against the military regime. But that did not happen. From another point of view, if you see this game from a different point of view, which I tried to do, it was a conflict between two different worlds. It was, quote unquote, extreme right-wing regime here in Athens, and from the other point, our opponent was a communist regime, Slavia of Prague. They were the giants of basketball by that time in European. Everybody would acknowledge their magnitude and their performance in the European basketball leagues by that time. They were giants. Nobody would expect that the team of AEK would ever beat Slavia of Prague. Of course, after that victory, amazing things happen in the, as a national, the national ego of the Greeks, and they were really, really lifted by this victory. But again, I have to tell you that victory took place in 1968, which was, as a year, it was considered to be a crack in time, because in the whole planet, that that year, it was a very important and critical year for the politics, what's happening in the whole world, in both regimes, in the Western world and the Iron Curtain as well.
Yeah, and that went on for several years, right? So even after the game, I imagine that it wasn't sort of an open society in the way it is today, right? So it must have taken years.
Absolutely.
But did the game ultimately allow the Greeks to accept the Greeks of Constantinople differently? Or was there still sort of a prejudice, towards
No, the prejudice, well, by that time, there was no prejudice. The prejudice was in the beginning, back in early 20s, when the team was founded. Then it didn't necessarily meant that all the players and all the executives that were in the team they have the origin from Constantinople. They were Greeks from all over the places in Greece, or some of them were from other. They were Greeks of diaspora from other places in the planet. But there was no prejudice by 1968. The only thing that everybody respects AEK is the fact that it has a legacy, it has a heritage, and AEK is always promoting this legacy. Now in the new stadium, the football stadium, which is an amazing stadium in Greece in international standards, there are two museums. One museum of refugees, of Greeks of diaspora, and another museum of the history of AEK. And always the people of AEK, the people who would participate in AEK, they wanted to focus and concentrate in the legacy of the team and of the club.
So you mentioned that you were age 11 when the game happened in 1968. I'm just a little bit younger than you, and I moved from Salt Lake City to Portland, Oregon in 75. And at that time, everybody was a Portland Trailblazers fan. And of course, the Blazers won the NBA championship in 76-77 season with Bill Walton at center, who was a Bruin like yourself. And I think he was before your time there, but he was everyone's hero. And when that game, I didn't get to see the game, but the whole city erupted. And I could only imagine that that's what it was to been like in Athens at that time. And obviously you show this in the film, even though you yourself, weren't at the game, but you heard on the radio, but it sounds like you were out on the streets too, celebrating. Is that correct?
Well, actually, what happened was, after the end of the game, I was living with my parents in a suburb of Athens, in north of Athens, which was called Pefki, very close to Marousi. For those of you that you probably know, it's 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers from downtown Athens. So everybody went out in all over Greece, actually. Those who couldn't go to the stadium, they went out and they were celebrating through the whole night in all over Greece. It was an amazing feeling. And I remember that, it was something that it was for the first time that I was experiencing such a feeling of collective enjoyment in the streets of the suburb that we were living by that time.
Yeah, I think in the States, things have obviously gotten better, but often after national championships, when people take to the street, it turns into chaos, and violence and destruction of personal property and all of that. So did any of that happen, or was it just really a different kind of celebration? I mean,
No, no,
80,000
no.
people to this day, I think it still holds the world record of the largest attendance at a single sporting event or a basketball event in this
Yes,
case.
it's been recorded in the Guinness Book of Records because it's an outdoor huge stadium. It was the stadium that the first Olympic Games took place back in 1896, and it's a treasure for. It's a milestone. It's an amazing place. Actually, in a couple of days, we'll have the the lighting of the torch lighting of the Olympic Games. It just it was originated in Olympia 2 days ago, April 16th, actually last Monday. And in a few days, we'll be having the flame in the same stadium that victory we're talking about took place. Actually, yes, the whole Greece were out with the cars, the horns were shouting, the Greeks were celebrating. It was an amazing feeling. I still remember it, although I was a kid.
Growing up in Athens, once you left Constantinople, were you or your family fans of Ike at that time, or was it later that you discovered this story?
The story goes like this. I was born in Constantinople back in late 50s. And from the very beginning, after I started even being 4-year-old kid or 5-year-old kid, everybody was telling me, we are Ike, we are Ike. Even the Greeks who by that time they were living in Constantinople, they were favoring Ike, which was a Greek team. It wasn't a Turkish team, okay? But in 1964, my father was deported because as 15,000 other Greek citizens of Istanbul were deported because of turbulence between Greece and Turkey due to Cypriotic problems. And when I came here in Athens, the first thing that my cousins, who were already here in Greece, they took me and they took me to a football game of AEK in the stadium in Nea Philadelphia, New Philadelphia, as we call it, which is the original place that AEK was founded and still is actually. So I was not a very fanatic following the team, but of course I was, since almost I was born, I was a fan of AEK. I was following the team, but not very fanatically. And, in 1968, that was the highlight of this relationship that I had with my team, which was actually, it was renewed when I had a phone call from the president of AEK, today's president, Mr. of the basketball AEK, of the basketball club, where he called me. It was back in 2016. I had just finished my previous feature-length film, Mythopathy, Notias. And he asked me to make, because in 2 years, in 2018, that would be the 50th anniversary of that victory. And he asked me to make a film about that victory. In the beginning, I was very reluctant, actually, to undertake such a project because I was very dry. I was very, very tired from my previous film. But he motivated me by telling me, okay, if you don't want to make a film, please help us construct and structure our archive with interviews because we want to keep our legacy. There are so many, old people, famous players, both in basketball, in other sports, and we are building an archive with all our legacy. And if you can be help us organize that. And that was a trigger for me. And I decided to start taking interviews of these people because some of them were very old. And I'm sorry to say that during the filming of the film, two people that I have taken the interviews and actually they appear in the film died. They passed away. So while I was shooting these interviews, they started sharing with me personal stories, the backstage of the games, not only of the specific game, but also of that period, the years before, from early 60s until 1968. And of course, some, I should say, gossiping about what was happening in the backstage during this period. And I found that it was an amazing, I could draw some interesting stories from these narratives that they were telling me. So I had this idea, and I shared that idea to the president, Mr. Angelopoulos, and I said, listen, I would prefer to make a documentary, but a special kind of documentary, which is now being called docu-fiction, which has it presents a real event, which is the game, and all the period during the final, but also I will be interested to embed in this film some fictional stories representing what was happening in Greece during this period and in the planet as well, what was happening during this period. So Makis Angelopoulos agreed. He loved the idea. So after having many interviews from all these people, the living players, for those that had passed away, I took interviews from their spouses, and I started writing some stories, fictional stories, but based on real events that they were narrated to me during my interviews with these people. And
I was going to ask you about that, the choice that you made to shoot this as a docudrama. I was somewhat familiar with what the movie was about, but when I hadn't seen it, and so when I saw it for the first time, I was a bit taken aback when I saw that it was going back and forth between these two types of filmmaking. Yes, it's a documentary, and sort of docudrama as a subgenre of documentary film, but was that choice more, dictated at all by the budget? Obviously, it seemed to me it'd be a lot less expensive to make a straight documentary than to make a narrative feature, but this obviously had to be more expensive than had you made a documentary, because you had to cast actors and rehearse and sort of, I mean, obviously the movie came together in the editing, and you have a very good editor in Lambis Haralambidis. I've worked with him before. So, and of course, all your movies have unbelievable visuals and a certain style that's, I think, unique to you personally. You can see it from Touch of Spice. I haven't seen your first film, but up through 1968, they're just fun to watch because they're so beautiful stylistically. But tell me about the choice that you made to do this as a docudrama, because that's not, I can't imagine it's not an easy task to sort of weave that together in the way you did.
The president of the team of the club, Angelopoulos, he wanted in the beginning to make a fictional film. He wanted to reenact the whole game. So that was going to be an amazing task. I wouldn't dare to think how I would do that. We had to find at least 20 basketball players that will look like the players of Icon team, and reenact and reproduce the whole game. He wanted a fictional film. I couldn't do that. And I said, he was willing to find, well, not to finance by himself, but to find the funds for such a uh, for such a production. I actually, it wasn't possible to make such a production in 2 years. It was an amazing, you know, task in order to organize and make even the script to be written for such a huge production. It needed 1.5 years at least, so we wouldn't have time because we had a limit, a time limit. The film had to be ready on until April of 28.
Right. I mean, it was important to release it on its 50th anniversary, correct?
Exactly. It had to be released, especially, in this before the anniversary or in the day of the anniversary. But I found the idea of combining documentary and fiction very, very challenging. I hadn't done that before. And actually, I would never consider myself as a documentary filmmaker. And I really, really excited. For me, it was a uncharted territory to start doing such a project. But that was a challenge for me. It was a bigger challenge than to make a fictional film, even if I had the script ready. So I proposed that to Makis, and he agreed. Of course, as you said before, it was much more expensive than makes a straight documentary, but we were very lucky because most of the actors that took place, all the above the line, they were very friendly in terms of of their fees, because most of them were Ike, and of course they didn't demand a lot of. The budget was not as we would expect it in very high levels because of the fictional part. But it was more expensive than being a straight documentary, of course.
Was there anything that you wanted to do that didn't make it into the film? I know you and I want you to speak to it as well. The story of the two brothers, but I'm just curious. Was there some other narrative or that you thought you were going to shoot that you didn't for whatever reason?
No. Actually, the opposite actually happened. The story of the two brothers, it was told to me after the end of the shooting. So I found that story amazing because it's a real story actually, and it was told to me by the godson of a refugee that he knew that story. It was told to him by his godfather. So he was a young person, but very militant in terms of providing and promoting the refugee conscience among the fans of Ike. And he told me the story. So I spoke with Makis and I said, listen, I've got here a treasure. This is an amazing story, and let's put it in the film as well. And it was a happy accident, the fact that we worked this. We included that story at the end of the film, and we closed the film with this story, which actually is a true story.
So you went back and shot those scenes
Yes,
before you
the
film.
whole bus subplot in the film. Which it was actually, it gave us the idea to structure the film around the bus, a bus like doing that
Right.
that ride during the game, and it was a part of the film that it was invented. Actually, it was shot after the end of the shootings.
So I noticed that there a few of the same actors that were in Politica Cucina that were in this film. Um, can you talk a little bit about the actors that you cast and
Sure.
so
Well,
the history
first of
that you
all,
have with them?
those are these actors are for me are lifelong friends. I mean, Hieroclis Michailidis, he was the father in Politica Cucina, and he's the bouzouki player,
Hmm.
and the in 1968. Stelios Minas also, he was the uncle of the young hero in Politica Cucina, and he's the person who searches for his brother. I'm not gonna give any spoiler about 1968. Obviously, most of the audience, they haven't seen the film, so but also Antonis Kafedjopoulos, he's a big star. He's an amazing actor, and I would expect to work with him, although he's from Constantinople as well. He has a similar story with me. He came, I think, in 1963, 1964, again as a as a member of a deported family from Constantinople. So um, these people are very good friends. They are very good colleagues. I always look forward to work with them, and of course, they are very talented people.
So I have, okay, one final question and specifically about the club. So was the club the way it operates, or its prominence in Greece as a sports club, did that change after the film was released in any way?
Well, I don't know if it changed, but all the members of all the clubs, the sub clubs of the AEK Sports Club, they are very proud that about this film. Actually, one of our opponents, Panathinaikos, they tried to make a film as well after our film came out, but.
Hmm.
Very often the film has been mentioned continuously, and all AEK fans, they are very proud about this film because it's an evidence of how AEK keeps uh, and communicates and transcends its legacy to the next generation. It goes beyond sports, and probably, as you will see, the film it's not. I wouldn't say it's a sports film. It's a better way to receive the film, to conceive the film, is by thinking that using a sports event as an alibi, we comment about a very specific period of the Greek history, starting from the origins of the previous century when a Greek team was formed by refugees, and also what happened during all these years and what happened in 1968, what was happening in Greece, and what was happening in the rest of the planet.
Right. I mean, the way we started this conversation, the game is very much a backdrop to all of these other sort of events and life experiences. So tell us before we say our goodbyes here, like where can people see the film?
I do know that it's in all platforms, in Google, in iTunes, and Amazon. I don't know if it's been taken. Well, uh,
So people can see it in the States.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
and one final question. I said I had, you know, that was my last question, but I guess I'm curious about your next project. I understand you want to do a contemporary film this time and possibly in the English language. Is that in the
Uh,
work?
I have two projects, but there is a lot of time in order to start working on them in terms of production. It's one film, which is a Greek film, but also there is a series about a famous Greek person. It's a biopic, which is going to be in English, and actually all major streaming channels in the United States, they want to be involved in this. But I cannot say more on that.
Well, we wish you the best when you are able to
Thank you.
talk about the movie. We'd love to have you back and talk more about that and have you back in New York at one of our festivals in the future. So again, just to remind our viewers that we're showing 1968 this Sunday, April 21st at MoMI at 3. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I want to thank you for your time and can't wait to see the movie again. All the best.
Same here. Thank you very much. Thank you.